Hello and welcome to Seeking Alpha Interviews. I'm Jane King at the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. With me, John Mason, Seeking Alpha contributor who just got back from a 17-day trip in Italy. So that sounds wonderful.
But
you also were doing some studying of their economy as well. So what was your overall take of what's going on in Italy right now?
Well, I got to see the northern part of Italy this time rather than the southern, and the northern is more economically vital, and people are engaging and working and things like that. The funny thing that you see in that, however, is that so much of it is dependent upon outsiders. Tourists.
Okay.
For instance, you go to Venice, and from talking with people there and the like, and that homeowners don't stay in Venice. They basically, the wealthier have bought houses there, and then through Airbnb and other sources that they're renting them out, which is what we did and so forth. And then we went into the some of the Lake District, Lake Como, for instance, and Lake Maggiore, and same type of thing there is that they're very busy and very active, but the people are basically responding to visitors and tourists rather than engaged in terms of industry or finance or something like that. Milan is a little different, but that's kind of the picture you get, is that not a lot is going on there in terms of real productive capacity.
Okay. Now, when I think of Italy, I think of fast, fancy cars, Ferraris, Lamborghinis. I think of excellently made clothing.
Mm-hmm.
But is there anything else that they're making there and exporting to the world?
Well, not to any extent. And even in those areas, that just some of the current research that I've been doing is that the idea is that they've stagnated, that they're kind of on a level plane now, and they're not really the leaders that they once were. And then you get into other things like in science and technology and education, and they're really not at the level that they were, say, in the 50s and 60s, right after the Second World War. And one of the things that you see in here is that a lot of the young people, rather than staying in Italy, they're even seeking their educational outlets in the United States and elsewhere. One of the recent statistics that I just remember is from Bill Emmott. He has a book, Good Italy and Bad Italy, and one of the things there is that Italy has a net outflow of university students to the rest of the world.
It's never a good long-term trend.
It isn't, and it really says a lot, and we're familiar with professors and educational people and scientists over here that rather than finish up in Italy with a degree there, they come to the United States and get their degrees here so that they have a better chance of being competitive in the job market. And that's not a real healthy position for any country to be in as far as their youth.
What happened we'll talk about Italy and then we'll talk about Europe as a whole, but I mean, what happened? Were these government decisions? Were they societies that just decided they had reached a peak level and just didn't want to work anymore? I mean, what was the psychology and what led to Italy being where it is today?
Well, a lot of people think back to the 50s and 60s when Italy was very, very vibrant, and you mentioned the fashion industry, but then there was this the movies and other things like that they were really leaders in a lot of things in the 50s and 60s, were very, very prosperous. But one of the interesting things to me in looking back at some of the history of Italy is that Italy is very new. That the 1861, 1871 period is when Italy unified. And then they went into the First World War. Then the real unification came when Mussolini came in, which was the 1922 to 1943 period. And guess what happened after that? The Italians were so crushed by the unification that Mussolini brought to it. They have been very intentional in terms of avoiding any unified government or any structure that might allow a unifier to come around and
Okay.
do that.
And do that again.
As a consequence, the nation is very regional, very local. Their national parliament is set up so that nobody can really control it. And nobody can really control it for an extended period of time. So as a consequence, since the Second World War, there have been more prime ministers than there have been years.
Wow.
And,
well, and they didn't have a government for a while.
They didn't have a
Right.
government for a while, and you know Berlusconi had 3 terms, but you know they were of 3 years or something like that. And then Renzi, who you know who is staging a comeback right at the present time, he was only in for 2 years or so. So you can't do much if that you have no continuity or sustainability in terms of the government.
Right.
And
if you don't have strong leadership, I mean, you don't obviously want a Mussolini situation, but you do need somebody who's got ideas and
Exactly.
the ability to carry them forward in a democratic way.
Exactly, exactly. But again, this goes back to a lot of Italy's history, and they don't have a lot of experience in terms of being anything other than their own separate regions or localities. And then so much is based on family, so much is based on, well, extended family. One brings up cases like the mafia and things like that, where the community becomes so important that it's what dominates rather than anything else. And it's a huge problem that they have to overcome.
Yeah, and they're certainly not alone in Europe. Each situation is different, but of course, you know, we know Greece has a lot of problems, but even Germany has faced stagnation. We've seen terrorist attacks in the UK. Switzerland, Germany, I was just there, and I mean, they seem vibrant, but there was a lack of kind of innovation that we're seeing in the United States. So I know you're writing a book on the EU. What's your kind of take of Europe overall?
Well, to me, some of the basic attitude, I mentioned Bill Emmott, who former editor-in-chief of The Economist. He has just a brand new book he just informed me about. I just got it yesterday and I read the chapter on Europe, and he basically ends the chapter on Europe. Now this was before the election in France. He is basically saying that the EU, given the way it's going and the policies that are in effect there, basically they're disintegrating, and they're also
and what particular policies
dismissive.
Do you think? The open borders?
Well, more in terms of not resolving some of the problems, like the banking problems. I mean, they've just, Italy is, with the EU, have just gotten over a big banking situation, which the oldest bank in Europe, and I can't, I'm not sure that I could get out the name of it right now, but it's in Siena, and it was founded in 1417 or something like that. Well, they've just cut a deal on that in order to help bail it out in order going into the future. Well, there are 2 other banks in Italy that are in very serious strait. But there's banking structure problems all over the European Union. This is one of the things which, in terms of policies, they're not doing. And as a consequence, you know, that to think, as Bill Emmott does, that, you know, that the EU is going to disintegrate and be dismissed is not very optimistic.
No.
And yet, one of the things that I saw turn when I was over in Italy was the fact that Macron got elected. And what was one of the first things that he did? He went to meet with Merkel. And they're starting to work together. Now, they seem to be trying to set a standard in which has not been in existence in the Eurozone up to this particular point. And then guess what happened? Renzi, preparing for election, said we need to have an election in September rather than next May, which is when it seemed like it was going to take place. the reason Renzi seems to be moving in this direction is that with the victory of Macron, with the movement to get Macron and Merkel together, Renzi wants to play on that momentum. Again, Macron is 39 years old. Renzi is early 40s. So you've got two young people and Merkel. And what can you really describe their politics? Well, I think they could be described as much as anything as pragmatic. They're going to try and make things work. And Renzi would like to get on this bandwagon because this is, he sees as the possibility of creating the momentum, the wave, if you will, that might bring along Europe, because here you've got the largest economy, Germany, the second largest economy, France, the third largest economy, Italy, and to put those three together and to get them moving in sync with one another, this seems to be the best possibility to overcome some of the hurdles and some of the restraints that exist within the European, and especially in Italy. So this is where you might say the hope is coming out this spring, is with the elections. And again, we've been focused so much on the right-wing populists, both in the Netherlands election, in the French election. We've got the five-star movement in Italy that represents that particular side. You've got some of that going on in Germany. So to think that some of that might be overcome at this particular time, and you've got this young pragmatic group, and I say that cautiously with Merkel included in that, you've got this young pragmatic group with those three states. If they're moving in the same direction to try and build a unity, that I saw before I left Italy was the hope that some people are seeing, that they might be able to put things together and resolve some of the issues that exist within the European Union.
It would be nice, because there's so much history and just beauty and wonderful people, and so it'd be nice to be able to see them become a vibrant continent again.
And they're very important to the United States. And part of the role in the world, again, with China rising up as it has, to have Europe and the United States working together again would be just a tremendous benefit for the Western nations.
Okay, thank you so much, John, for
Jane,
sharing your
welcome.
thoughts and your insight into Italy and what's going on in Europe, and we appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much, Jane. It's good to be here again.
And thank you as well for joining us on Seeking Alpha Interviews.